King Louis XIV, one of the most well-known French monarchs. He ruled over France for 72 years, making him the longest ruling monarch in the history of the country. Hello everyone, welcome to Top 10 History, your hub for historical lists and amazing history facts. Today, we're going to go over the top 10 amazing facts about King Louis XIV. Make sure to watch until number 1 because the number 1 fact that we chose about the French monarch might shock you. Before we begin, if you're new to the channel, make sure that you subscribe to the channel with notifications on because we release a new historical top 10 list every single day. Also, make sure to smash that like button. Alright, let's get right into the video. He suffered from anal fistula. You would think that a man who would rule over a country for 74 years would be in extremely good health in order for him to live that long. Well, his life expectancy was a lot shorter than it turned out to be, since he suffered from a little thing known as anal fistula. Anal fistula is a condition when a small tunnel develops between the end of the bowel and the skin near the anus, which then fills with pus and gets infected. A condition like this would have likely led to an early demise of the king, especially because a surgery to cure this condition was very risky, especially for this time period. However, the operation was successful. The surgeon who performed the operation had practiced on 75 different people before attempting to operate on the king. With the successful surgery, the king was able to enjoy a long and healthy life. The British anthem, God Save the King, may have been composed written about Louis XIV, wishing the king a good recovery from his condition. However, this theory is not confirmed. He married his mistress. French kings were often known to have mistresses in addition to their wives, aka the queen. In France, a king having a mistress was no secret, and they often had a presence in the court. Sometimes they even had a larger presence than the queen herself. During King Louis XIV's 74-year-long reign, he had 3 mistresses, Louise de la Vière, the Marquise of Montespan, and Madame de Maintenon. But the most important of the 3 mistresses was the last one mentioned, Madame de Maintenon. Madame de Maintenon was supposed to take care of King Louis XIV's children, but soon became to have a much larger role. Once the Queen Marie Therese had passed away, Madame de Maintenon moved from being Louis's mistress to Louis's lover. Just 3 months after his original wife's death, Louis decided to marry the mistress in secret. This was the first time ever in French history where a king married one of his mistresses. The two remained married until Louis's inevitable death. Number 8. The Chair of Affairs. In Versailles, the court set a very strict set of rules in which they called the etiquette. The etiquette set a very high standard for respect, etiquette, and courtesy whenever in the presence of the royal family. As extra as King Louis XIV was, he made extra rules and privileges which were sort of odd. And of them involved something that he called the Chair of Affairs, which was a chair that he would sit on when addressing his couriers. Seem unusual? Well, here's the juicy part. The Chair of Affairs was a toilet. That's right, he only wanted to address his couriers while he was sitting on the toilet. Something that was truly strange even for the time. It takes a really explosive person to name his toilet and be sitting on it while he's being addressed by his royal subjects. Oh, Louis. Number 7. The Birth of the King. Louis XIV was the son of his father, Louis XIII, and his mother, Anne of Austria. However, the birth of Louis XIV was quite delayed, and delayed to the point where no one expected Louis XIII to have an heir at all, as the royal couple went 20 years without having an heir to the throne. One reason for this is that his father, Louis XIII, was a homosexual. He preferred the company of other men rather than the company of his wife, hence why he never had a child for the longest time. When Louis was finally conceived, he was named Louis Dieudonné, which means gift from God in French. The whole country celebrated the birth of King Louis XIV, as it was exciting news for King Louis XIII to finally have an heir to the throne. There were huge celebrations in Paris with fireworks and festivities galore. Before this day, there had never been such an extravagant party in honor of the birth of the king. His first sex partner was arranged. Because of his father's, King Louis XIII's homosexuality, his mother, Queen Anne of Austria, was afraid that Louis XIV would follow in the same path as his father. In order to make sure that this didn't happen, Queen Anne quickly chose to a woman that was assigned to take her son's virginity. However, the mother's choice for her son's first suitor was rather odd. She chose Baroness of Beauvais, an extremely ugly woman who was missing an eye. The reasoning for her to choose such a ghastly woman was likely to prevent Louis XIV from falling in love with her. The Queen Regent just wanted Louis to lose his virginity but not develop a relationship with the woman. She taught the young king everything there was to know about sex for 2 years. In return, Louis XIV gifted her with a castle and an annual pension. Quite a generous gesture from the king. The woman must have been sleeping with him or something. Number 5. The Palace of Versailles. The extravagant Palace of Versailles became the residence of King Louis XIV. The beautiful palace was a symbol of royalty and of an absolute monarchy. It was a symbol of wealth and glory for the king, and Louis made it his mission to display this glory to the world in the form of his extravagant home. In addition to himself, the palace also became home to members of his court, which were made up of high nobility as well as government officials. And a big reason why Louis XIV wanted these noble families and government officials to live with him in the palace was so that he could keep an eye on them. Louis wanted to keep a close eye on everyone in order to prevent revolts and any actions that would threaten his position of power. During his childhood, there was a civil war that broke out because some nobles challenged his legitimacy to the throne. Louis XIV was especially trying to prevent something like that ever happening again, so he kept a very close eye on these nobles. People bet on his death. Towards the end of his life, it was no secret that Louis XIV was ill and was reaching the end of his life. Especially at his advanced age, the world was expecting the old king to pass at any moment, and certain health conditions such as smallpox, typhus, and tapeworms were only increasing the likelihood of his death. In sort of disrespect to the crown, some of the English started to make bets on when the French king was going to die. The king found out about these wagers and was deeply upset by this. In order to make the public think that he was in good health, he decided to eat a lot more, since eating a lot was a sign that someone was in good health. King Louis XIV ultimately passed away in 1715 after ruling over France for a remarkable 74 years. Number 3. The Man in the Iron Mask. The Man in the Iron Mask remains one of the biggest mysteries of the reign of Louis XIV. The Man in the Iron Mask was an unknown prisoner whose name, age, face, or anything about him was completely unknown, but his existence was brought to attention by Voltaire. No one even knows why this man was imprisoned in the first place. It is rumored that Louis XIV made it so that no one can see the man's face, and if his identity was ever to be uncovered, that he should immediately be put to death. But what was even more unusual is that the Man in the Iron Mask was treated well, as if he were a prisoner of high nobility. This led many to believe that this mystery man was of high significance or high nobility, and people start to wonder who he actually was. Some theories include that the man is Louis' twin brother, whose face is hidden so that no one can connect him to the king. Another theory is that the man is a foreign spy. Another thought he was a finance minister who was stealing money from the crown in order to build his own castle. Unfortunately, this will be a mystery that will likely never be solved. He was the Sun King. If there were any symbols that described King Louis XIV, it was the sun, as he would go on to be known as the Sun King. On the gates of Versailles, you can even see a beautiful ornate golden sun carved into the gates. At first, the symbol of the sun was a reference to his personality, as he was very extroverted and loved to be the center of attention. Speaking of extroverted, King Louis XIV also loved acting, and even played the part of the sun during a ballet. And then dancers who represented the French nobility danced around him. The sun was also symbolic, as the sun was the center of everything, much like the king who was the center of everything, with everything else literally revolving around him. It was truly an honorable yet a flamboyant title to have, to be known as the Sun King. He learned about war in the gardens of Versailles. It's not just in Game of Thrones where kings and queens meet in gardens in order to talk politics and plot against one another. After Louis XIII had passed away, Louis XIV became king at just 4 years old and needed to be properly educated as soon as possible so that he can properly rule the country. Louis was tutored on every topic that was essential for effectively leading a country, and one of those subjects was about war. In the gardens of Versailles, the young king would practice war with boys his own age, where he commanded a small army of children, and they had little mock battles in the garden. It's like when you were a kid and played war games with your friends, but this was actually training in case France ever went to the war. And this training paid off for Louis XIV because France was plagued with war for most of his reign. If Louis XIV was never trained in the art of war, he most likely wouldn't have had a successful reign. Did these facts shock you? Make sure that you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on more amazing historical facts and much more. If you like this video, check out this next video on the 10 amazing facts about the Cuban Missile Crisis. Alright, have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video.